So we're a nice Saturday here. I was going to go ahead and bolt the wheels and tires back on Project Menace. However, a couple of things. Number one, I just can't leave stuff alone. I placed an order at LMR just because I wanted to get a few things right. So things like new 5.0 emblems. Now, I know they're not in the right place, and I don't know what the paint's going to look like underneath these guys. I have a feeling that I might have to commit to the same location. However, you know, all the black's peeling, it's a little bit of corrosion in there, and I want that 5.0 to just be perfect. Reason being, that's the reason why I got into these cars, was seeing this emblem on a fender, and especially in the movie Menace to Society, why wouldn't I go the extra mile here on Project Menace? So we got that, stuff like some seatbelt sleeves that were all cracked, door striker clips, armrest plugs. I got new door panel bezels to go around the door handles on the inside of the door panels. And then guys, check these out. All right, can't be balling without personalized floor mats. And I've got numerous rolls of tape here because I'm going to be pulling off some trim. I've actually already got these pieces to replace. I'll be pulling off kind of these guys, wiper cowl, all that. Other pieces like the door handles and the hockey sticks, I'm going to paint on the car just because these guys are a liability for anybody who is familiar with these guys and the way that they are bolted down underneath the top assembly. Not that it's impossible to get them off. It's just one of those things where if there's any corrosion on the nuts going on to those threaded studs that are part of the injection mold of these, last thing we want to do is snap any clips off, because if you start snapping those clips off, you're going to have to get into epoxying them back on. You're going to want to make sure that they're strong, because this ultimately is where your top boot cover all clips into, and a good amount of pressure ends up going on those. So they're going to get masked off on the car. I'm going to have to be pretty diligent about the luggage rack as well. And you know, I can take off, this piece will come off, right? But all of these other pieces, lattice pieces, whatever you want to call them, they are riveted on. So I'd have to drill the rivets out just to paint them. And you know what? I'm not going to go to that extreme. And one other thing, well, two other things. The headlights were okay. If you guys remember the headlight portion in the center, they're pretty yellow. And if you see a little comparison here, right? New versus used. Worst part is Jose that used to own the car, he's like, man, I just put all new stuff on, and he's like, the trim was all nice and everything else. Well, that's what happens when you leave a car out in a Copart lot for God knows how long. Things start sunbaking and everything else. But now that the paint is all fixed on the car and everything is looking real nice, I just need to wash it and, you know, get a couple, there's a little bit of buffing residue that's still on this side, because this whole side got buffed out to kind of bring back some of that clear coat that went a little cloudy on us. And then, you know, that front bumper cover is freshly sprayed. We got the dent in the hood fixed, and the trunk lock cylinder got shaved right off, and it looks phenomenal. So we'll get into that here soon. I was going to bolt the wheels back on, like I said, as is, but then I saw this picture of another, and I think it was in 5.0 or Menace to Society 5.0 rags or something like that on Instagram. Never realized that there were so many Foxbody convertibles on wire wheels. I didn't, like, I thought that there would be a good number. No idea that it'd have like its own Instagram page and like hundreds of Foxes, I swear, on wire wheels. And a couple of them, there was one in particular, if I have the picture screenshotted, I think I do, I'm going to post it up. I'm cutting the coil out of these springs. It looked good the way that it was. However, I need that extra little bit. And I think that won't sacrifice things rubbing. I think ultimately it's going to make things look pretty nice. In fact, maybe I'll just do like half coil without the isolators. We'll see how aggressive I want to go. So that's on the docket. I've already changed the oil. So fluids are looking good. and just trying to go over all of the little things and like just get this thing as close to perfect as I can get it without sinking myself financially, because obviously, like I said, I made a deal for the car. And if you guys, again, if you haven't listened to that podcast with Jose, who used to own the car when it got stolen, make sure you check that out, because it's just an amazing story you don't want to miss. So let's get to work on getting this little mini transformation or rehab or reno or facelift, if you will, done on Project Menace. All right, guys, lots of masking, and I just want to kind of go over the trim with you before I spray it, and that way you guys can get a really good idea of the before. So again, from afar, the camera always makes things look a little bit better than they are. So you can see it almost looks like there's a texture in here. You know, we got marks, bugs. Now, of course, I'm gonna be taking a Scotch pad to all that stuff and be cleaning up little areas like this in the top frame, windows, door handles, the hockey sticks, and oh, I still need to get tape in here. So, you know, try and sneak tape underneath corners, make sure that all the lines are covered and tucked, and you know, I'm not painting the weather strip that's underneath the trim pieces. So all of this is pretty much good to go. The parts that were easily removable are down there, including our new door belt strip runners, whatever they're actually called. I forget off the top of my head. So I'm going to be taking a red or purple Scotch pad rather, and I'll be going over everything to get it nice and smooth. All right. And once everything's nice and smooth, wipe it down with some Prep-All. You can see that old product is very dirty. Then, if we have any imperfections or bare surfaces, be using a little bit of black high build primer surfacer, and this is flexible, specifically designed for what we're doing right now. And then topping everything off with some SEM trim black. So there you guys have it. I've done tons of videos on trim restoration before, some on car, some off car. It really depends on the situation, right? In order to get these off, it's a little bit of a bear. You could risk ruining some weather stripping, you know, trying to take off door mirrors anything after 88 where they're this style. You gotta take the door panel off. And there's a lot of just intricacies. We already talked about those hockey sticks on the back side there, and if we wanted to get all the luggage rack pieces off, we got to drill off rivets. So in this case, all the trim that is hard attached to the car is staying on there. The stuff that was easily removable is off, and we'll go through, get this all covered up in plastic, and we'll scuff everything down, get it all prepped up, and get it sprayed. Oh, all right guys, lots of masking, but everything is cut out and masked around and protected. So now I'm gonna get to making sure everything is pushed down, double check, make sure I don't have any gaps in the plastic that could get overspray on things. And guys, it's really important, you know, make sure there's nothing worse than overspray You know, use a razor blade, get into all the grooves, because your prep is everything, as we know, or as we should know. All right, so make sure, see how there's some top exposed there. I didn't get it underneath the tape, so I'll get tape on that. That's what you do. Inspect all your work. It's like measure twice, cut once. All right. Sometimes it's easy to lay the tape down, but then you kind of forget to go over it and make sure it's stuck. And because even if it's, you know, up a little bit, and could let paint through. Not that we couldn't get it off, just easier to not get it on there in the first place. A little bit of glass exposed there, right there. Just make sure I get all that. Alright guys, trim is all painted up. I moved the Celine out, the Dutch out, threw some plastic over some of the other cars in here, and just went to town because the temperatures actually drop pretty quickly when the sun starts going down at this time of year, and I wanted to get the paint on and allow it to cure overnight before obviously I start messing around with stuff too much. I'll give it probably, I'd say like about an hour, and then I'll peel all of the plastic and everything else off. But you can see I'm pretty happy with the way that everything turned out. There's still a little bit of texture left on these. You know what? It's not the end of the world. Things are looking good. My quick little repair here to fix the chunk that was missing out of the hockey stick, that turned out well. I sprayed some clear coat on the lens here for the third brake light to get that all nice and shiny and crisp looking now that we have fresh headlights and fog lights in the front and everything else. So ultimately guys, once all the plastic and everything comes off and the car is all cleaned up, the car's gonna look really, really good. So there we go. All right, so we're Sunday morning. I've got like an hour before I have engagements for the day with my better half and some family. And I'm gonna see if I can't get the car lowered, at least the suspension work. Maybe the wheel's not bolted back on the car, but I'm giving myself an hour to try and get it done. So what I'm gonna be doing in terms of the front is I'm gonna be removing the little brake line holder against the frame rail up in there where the soft line meets the hard line. That's gonna allow that brake line to kind of separate away from the frame rail, give us some room to work with. I am going to remove this 13/16 nut at the top of the strut and remove the sway bar end link, and that's going to give us enough room to get the whole spindle and control arm to come down And that being a factory spring, it's going to take a little bit to get it out of there. So there'll be some pry bars involved. The back, we will drop the rear shock mount and probably have to drop the quad shock. Yes, this car has quads. And by doing so, that should give us enough to get the rear differential down and pry that spring out of there. Now, I'm not going to cut these springs. I have another set of factory springs that I'm going to cut. These ones will ultimately be the backups because we know how the look is, we know how they feel. Not to say that all stock springs shouldn't be the same, but you just never know. Some might be a little bit more fatigued than others, and these are the ones that came in the car. So it's sometimes better to keep the OG stuff if you can. So that's the name of the game. Pull some springs out and then go cut up the other springs. And the idea is to drop this car 1 inch, front and rear. That's all I'm looking for, nothing more. It's not going to take that much in order to achieve that. So let's see if we can get this knocked out in an hour. Alright guys, there's the spring that we just took out. Here's my other set of factory stock springs. Let's see if I can get this off while holding the camera. Oh yeah. Okay. Boom. Alright, that's pretty even, Steven. Almost might even confuse which is which. So we're good there. There's our original. Here's the one that we're going to remove some material from. Stock spring is about 14.5, okay? 14.5, and plus the isolators would be about 14.75. So if we were gonna run the isolators, we would want our base point to be the base point's 14.75 regardless. However, we would want to run that into our math knowing that we're gonna put that 1/4 inch back into the spring. So it'd pretty much mean we'd take this down to 13.5, which is probably right around the 3/4 mark, 3/4 of a coil. So if we did 13.5 and then we added the isolators back, that's going to put us at 13.75, and that would be a full inch, and give or take, right? Just in terms of the way the geometry and the way that the spring sits and everything else. Now you can see that it kind of curves up a little bit more here and then it tapers off. So there is a little bit of exponential change, if you will, between here and here. So sometimes it's safe just to do about a half coil. But what I am going to do, I am going to go down to 13.5. So I'm going to take a full inch out of the coil and not put the isolators in, which means it should be about 1.25 inches of drop. And if it's too low, then what we can do is we can always put the isolators back in and get that 1/4 inch back. But I don't think that's going to be the case. The other important thing to keep in mind is the more we take off this coil without isolators, the easier it's going to be to get that damn spring back into the control arm. So I'm going to go with 3/4 of a coil and no isolators. So the drop's going to be somewhere around 1 inch, 1.25 inches. There we go. All right guys, corner number 1 is done, and I got the spring out and back in probably in less than 10 minutes. Definitely less than 10 minutes. I'd be surprised if it wasn't even just 5 minutes. There's multiple ways that you can take the spring out. Like you can pull the caliper off, take the lower strut mount bolts on. There's different ways everybody does it. The reason why I chose this way is because the alignment in the car is pretty good. I don't want to mess with the camber or anything. So when you just take out that top strut nut off and pull the strut down, just be careful that you don't ding or hit your fender when you're maneuvering it. So the reason for that is that you're not changing any suspension geometry or anything. That point is stationary. It's only got one way to go. Whereas if you take off those lower strut mounts off the spindle, there is actually a little bit of movement in there that could affect your camber. So that's the reason why I did it this way. I might shoot that caliper with a little bit of paint. You know, it was corroded up. I cleaned it up. to get it ready. I'll spray some Seymour. I'll find a nice color to spray on there. You can see how dirty they were to start. I'll get maybe some of the new Seymour cast blast, something or other that they've given me tons of cans of, with real aluminum in the paint, guys. Let's see here. Original cast iron gray finish. I'm gonna go with that. There you go. See, nothing too crazy, nothing too wild. I love all the Seymour products, I really do. Cast Blast, original cast iron gray finish, made with actual metal material. So, whether that does anything or not, but you can smell. Wear a mask, guys, because the way that smells, you know it's not good for you, but you know that means it's a really good product. All right, so let's come over to the driver's side here. A little bit less room to work, but we'll get it done nonetheless, and we're gonna time this one. So my tools are over there. I'm gonna include grabbing my tools from the other side. We are at 10:14. All right, so we're gonna, the spring is already cut. This is gonna be moving my tools over, getting the spring swapped out, the caliper painted, and then from there you guys can guess how long it would take to stick the wheel back on. But now we're at 10:15. Let's go. All right, time is 10:32. So 17 minutes start to finish, and that side, or that corner, actually fought me because it was hard to get the spring in there, probably just because of the angle and contours and everything else that I was fighting. And I broke the nozzle off my spray can, but I made it work, so let's move on to the rear. Here is the passenger side. We're gonna take off the quad shock mount quick. Lower shock mount, that'll allow us to drop the axle on this side down far enough, pry the spring out, and then we'll grab our other spring that we cut down and put it back in, bolt our shocks back on, and that's pretty much it. I'm confident that we can do this one in like 10 minutes flat, so let's go. Boom. All right, guys, time check. 9 minutes flat. Got it done. All right, I gotta go do my Sunday engagements. We'll come back, we'll be getting the wheels back on and wrapping up seeing the mini transformation on Project Menace. So stick around.